Hello, everybody. My name is Nick Santos. Thank you so much for coming to this June 26th, Friday, 2026's FOIA Friday. Today we'll be covering elections and all the things going that go into all your election questions. And right here we have a great public records advocate, Michael Barfield. Michael, would you mind introducing yourself?
Thanks, Nick. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Barfield. I'm the executive director at the Florida Center for Government Accountability and also serve as an investigative reporter at the Florida Trident.
Awesome, and thank you so much for joining. I just want to mention to the chat and the attendees here, feel free to, put anything you'd like in the chat at the end of the session here, near the end of the session. We're gonna actually go into a question and answer time from you guys. So please feel free to post them all here. I will go back into the chat history and read from the most recent to the end. So yeah, alrighty. Well, Michael, again, thanks so much for being here. I think we should get started. So to sort of like level set here, I just kind of want to say, right now, in the past like 6 years, I think that the elections landscape in the United States has changed quite a bit compared to like the normative landscape that it was before that. Obviously, COVID and a lot of other events in the year of 2020 and 2021 has caused a massive shift in how things work and also how reporting works for this type of beat, right? And this year being a midterm year, the lessons that we've learned in the past 6 years are all the more important to take with us as we run our beats and as we do our journalism and reporting, in the next coming few months. So, Michael, I'm really excited to have you here to talk about these issues. I know you're an expert when it comes to Florida public records and elections. So, this is going to be a great time. I wanted to start this conversation very quickly by asking you, for a reporter trying to understand what happens in a contested election or in a ballot dispute, what is the records roadmap? Where do you even begin?
Well, great question. The first uh, place that you would begin is the canvassing board. Florida has 67 counties, all of which have a canvassing board, which must meet in public, and their role in the elections process is to review any challenges to ballots, and it is a highly public process. The public, they have to give notice of their meetings, and the public is allowed to attend and observe. It's usually a three-member board, and the initial process is among those three, where questions of any irregularities that staff identify at the various elections offices throughout Florida are brought to their attention, and they try to resolve them within the rules and the statutes that govern the framework. Then, if there is a more formalized objection by the candidates, then that also goes initially to the canvassing board for resolution, again in a public setting, and any resolutions after that usually land in circuit court uh, for state and local elections, and also for federal elections. But sometimes, as we know, Florida is famous for, from the Bush v. Gore election, they can land in federal court.
Mhm.
It just depends on the nature. Usually they cycle through state court and then land in federal court in that scenario.
Gotcha. Well, that's actually extremely interesting. When it comes to the ability for the public to observe these open meetings when they review these ballots, does the right does the public and reporters have a right to be able to be at these meetings? Is there any capacity that the board has to refuse entry to somebody?
There is no right for them to refuse uh, entry, and any member of the public and a reporter um, can attend.
Mhm.
Uh, you don't, usually, they are very receptive and they like the public, members of the public, and reporters to attend. Um, They don't have to engage with you and answer questions, but generally I have found that they do.
Hmm.
And they're happy to see that members of the public are interested in the process. So that's been my experience for decades of attending canvassing board meetings.
Awesome, cool. And then one last question on the board meetings themselves. What does the vibe tend to be like? You know, is it like very, very, very stuffy, or does it tend to be sort of a mishmash of different people in the community just interested in their elections?
It's different. There are activists. There are more reporters than activists. And sometimes it can be humorous. I can tell you one particular event that was very funny.
Okay.
And so it's not very formalized. Uh, I've never seen any contentious issues at the canvassing board meetings other than the Bush v. Gore in Palm
Hmm.
Beach. That was pretty intense.
Hmm. Gotcha. Okay. So good to know. Good to know. All right. I'm moving on here. So Florida has a strong sunshine law tradition, as we all know. During my time in the Fed, you know, and coming into Muck Rock, I went from try really knowing the federal FOIA and starting to learn about the state FOIAs, and I was actually very genuinely surprised, gladly surprised, to figure out just how comprehensive the Florida State FOIA or Sunshine Laws can be, and as they are written. But election records seem to be a constant battleground. Where does election administration sit in terms of transparency? Are officials generally compliant, or is this an area where you're regularly having to litigate to be able to actually make a productive outcome happen?
Uh, I think Florida is more transparent than any other state.
Hmm.
It's well known, the Florida Sunshine Law which covers meetings,
Hmm.
and in the Public Records Act, which covers records. Not all states allow that ballots that have been voted on to be inspected by members of the public. Florida is one state that any citizen. You don't have to even be a citizen of Florida. You're you're a person.
Yep.
You can come to, and you don't even have to identify yourself.
Hmm.
You can inspect every ballot that has been cast if you want to.
Wow, I didn't know that about it being so open. That's actually really fantastic. Have you ever heard of a situation or anecdotally heard of you know, someone being asked for ID, or is it really sort of, you know, as far as you're aware, it is that open?
There are a few other states. I think Florida was the first,
Hmm.
and there's some limits on that. The inspection has to be done in the presence of uh, um, a staff member of the supervisor of elections office, and
Okay.
that's for the integrity. They don't want anyone destroying the
Of
ballots.
course, of course.
But you know, you can inspect actual ballots that have been cast, not merely copies or the digital tabulation of them. And I think it was unique in Florida at the time that law was passed. I don't remember when but it's been a long time. And historically, I think it's been as long as 40 or 50 years.
I see. Now, when it comes to election records specifically, let's say records relating to the 2022 midterms, right? Do you feel like somebody seeking records through the Public Records Act and the Sunshine Law? I think it's the Public Records Act, right, in Florida?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Through the Public Records Act, if is there, do you find that there is a difference in ease of access if you are asking for records from further in the past versus things that are very topical? So, like, do you think it's easier to get records from, say, the 2020 midterms versus, you know, what we're going to be coming upon today in the next few months, which is going to be the 2026 midterms? What's your thought? What are your thoughts there?
I don't think that it matters. There's
Okay.
some subtle wrinkles. For example, timing matters relative to election contests in Florida, um, although the law does anticipate that inspection might occur before the deadline to file, if someone is filing a challenge to contest the election.
I see.
And that period is 10 days after certification of the vote and the ballots.
Hmm.
If inspection is requested before that deadline, the supervisor must make a reasonable effort to notify the candidates and let them attend. They
Hmm.
don't have to attend. They don't have to delay it if it's inconvenient for them. If they say, well, I can't do it until after the certification process. They're offered that opportunity. They don't get to control the scheduling of it. Um, and and if ballots are pulled into litigation as evidence, that's another exception that the statute makes. Then
Hmm.
they're temporarily unavailable. Um, uh,
Hmm. Until what
but
time?
that, yeah, but that's longer in the process. That's post certification. Pre
Hmm.
certification, you certainly can inspect them. Now, it might be easier because of that uh, uh, issues relating to potential litigation after certification, that there will be a delay, as opposed to going back to your question, an election that's already been decided and
Right.
not in that is, yes, easier to get if it's
Got it.
years in the past.
Got it. Got it. Okay, perfect. So, reporters later going into the new midterms here, they might expect to have some reasonable delays as things get certified, as challenges come up and things like that. But maybe, after some time, into 2027, it might be easier to go back and get those records once those things are hashed out. That's what it sounds like to me.
Correct.
Got it.
Yes.
Perfect. Now, you mentioned that, you can go in and inspect the ballots in Florida, which is, I think that is so novel and very, very cool coming from a public records geek. But I'm also curious, right? A lot of the different state FOIAs and the federal FOIA make carve-outs for PII, right? My question to you is, I'm guessing you're also able to see who voted for who, right? If you're
No,
going,
no,
no,
it's
okay.
de-identified. The ballots in Florida
Oh,
do
wow.
not contain any identifying information about the voter.
Okay.
Um, it's so when you inspect the ballot, you only see how a voter
Right.
voted or all
Okay.
voters voted.
Hmm.
You do not get no one, no one knows the identity of the voter. Now, the exception would be in an absentee ballot
Mm.
that they can redact the name of the individual because, for example, let's say they're in military service and the ballot is postmarked from overseas, comes in
Yes.
later, but it's postmarked before the date of the election. They redact the name of the voter, so no, other than the supervisor of elections and their staff, they know the identity of the voter who voted by absentee ballot, but no one else does.
Wow. Okay. That's very prescient on on behalf of the state of Florida, but that makes sense. It is the state of Florida. Really cool. I love that. That's a, I'm very tickled by that for some reason. I don't know why. I just think it's so good to have like that mechanism of transparency while also protecting people's PII. I feel like it's very like on paper it sounds like it might be a little bit burdensome. It sounds like, in another state the public records official might say, that is burdensome. But it sounds like, the Florida is actually doing really, really well with it. That's fantastic. Are there any other states that do that or have that system of inspection and privacy protection, as far
You
as you know?
I don't know the answer to that
Okay.
question. I'm sure that there are,
Hmm.
but again, perhaps no surprise after the 20 or the 2000 election, Florida uh, spent quite a bit of time updating its election code to think of all the permutations that could happen. The one we're all familiar with is the hanging Chad. Um,
Yes, yes.
and so So And I think that other states took note of that and also updated their election code, but I'm not as familiar with the election code in other states as I am with Florida.
Of course, of course. Well, you guys seem to be doing pretty good, so that's pretty awesome. Okay, all right. So now, obviously, when you all, can you, I'm sorry, I know you probably mentioned it before, but I just want to be able to, for you to mention it again. What organization are you with for the sake of our attendees?
The Florida Center for Government Accountability, it's a
Yeah,
nonprofit organization. And then our publishing arm, we publish original content, is the Florida Trident, and mostly investigative reporting.
perfect. Yep. So when it comes to your organization, you guys must get a ton of reporters to you guys are that are seeking help from you guys, right?
Yes, it's my primary job and one that I love. I talk to reporters daily, sometimes like today, I think I'm on my sixth reporter call and out in the field doing some investigative reporting.
We love that. A man of the reporting people, a well-informed democracy and all that work. But so when it comes to these reporters that come to you, right? Um, where I know that, so let me backtrack here. Um, what are some of the more common mistakes that you see reporters making at the jump? We're talking about not seasoned reporters that might have been on this elections beat since, the time of the hanging chads, right?
Yeah.
I'm more talking about like, your more your green reporters. This might be their first time on this particular beat, and this particular atmosphere, right? Yeah, what sort of misconceptions do you think that sometimes they have that might be, pushing them in the wrong place? And how might you, what are some things that you tell them often to help acclimate them or re-guide them?
Um, you know, Reaching out to um, other seasoned reporters, our organization we put on some conference training sessions, webinars every now and then. I'm glad Muck Rock is doing this one. Um, and Also really giving some thought to, say you're making a records request.
Hmm.
Um, the language can be so important in terms of
Yes.
what records that you're seeking.
Hmm.
Once you identify what records you are seeking, and part of that process is looking at the records that are required to be created by the election process. And by that, you would go to the supervisor of elections website. Go ask and interview the supervisor of elections or the PIO. Find out about their process. What records are created? What kind of access can you get? They generally are very helpful in giving you that information to be able to inform you about the process, the records that are available, and how you can get access to them.
Got it. Got it. Sounds good. It's funny that you mentioned that because I feel like now that we're sort of in this, we're entering the elections like, news cycle here. You are not the only person to have made that exact same statement. There was, I believe, a podcast, and I can't remember, I'm blanking on the name of what journalist was talking about. I believe it was like a CBS journalist, but they said something along the same lines. They basically said you have a lot of people, right, who otherwise would not have not had a public interest, sorry, had not had an interest generally in this process for quite some time. But now you have a lot of people who aren't even journalists, right? These are just, normal everyday citizens that have just gotten very intrigued in the records and the elections process. Um, and they were making that observation, and then the thing that they followed up with was, one of the ways to be able to get rid of some of these misconceptions, this misinformation that's going around in regards to our elections, is simply by picking up the phone and calling your elections commissioner, right? That seems to be, is that just a good first antidote to misinformation
Oh
with,
yeah, I
yeah.
would definitely start there and develop that relationship with the supervisor of elections or the, the other jurisdictions may call them by a different title, but
Hmm.
develop that relationship because it'll pay off and do it. well in advance of the election because they
Yep.
get busy
I was
around
gonna
the time of,
ask. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, so that brings me to the question that I had in my brain. I think I cut you off there really quickly, but yeah, what do you think is a good timeline, right, to be to reach out with enough time? Do you think it's like, 2, 3 months before? I imagine you must counsel against reaching out like the day of the election, right?
Um, well, no, there's a time for that, but learning about the process, I
I see.
think,
I see.
as far in advance of the election as you can. I mean, yes, 2 to 3 months out, they have a lot more time on their hands. As you approach, say, we're approaching the primary in Florida for in August for
Yep.
local elections, county commissioners, et cetera. Um, things start getting a lot busier for them in mid to late July.
Mhm.
Um, and then they have the the primary election, and of course they're busy for another 2 to 3 weeks.
Yep.
Then they have a breather somewhat before the general, and then and pretty much all of October and through mid-November they're super busy.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that they're not going to talk to you. Generally, they will,
Yep.
but it's a lot better if you're already informed about the process early on when they have downtime and you're then laser pointing questions to them during the actual elections.
Got it. Got it. And that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Besides the election commissions or your local election officials in that you have around you, what are other resources that journalists or even members of the public can use that you know about, whether they're private or like if open to just public? Yeah, what else is out there besides your local officials?
Well, it, there's, you know, digesting election information. One of the things that I highly recommend is making a records request like now in advance of the election for the electronic record keeping policies or manuals that the elections officials have. Some of them are
Hmm.
already online,
Yep.
and it it tells you it's a roadmap for what records they keep and how they store them. And here's the most important thing, how they can be exported in digital format. I
Wow.
love spreadsheets,
Yeah.
numbers when you're talking about elections.
Yeah.
So, understanding the language that they use, their software system, get a copy of their record keeping manual, and it will be your Bible for elections coverage, records you can see, and understanding their process, even at a granular level.
Gotcha. That I think that's a great. I think it's a great idea. One thing that I tell a lot of the folks that I train when it comes to public records access in terms of the FOIA, the federal FOIA, is I tell folks I have a project that I do actually request the SOPs for the FOIA office, right? Standard operating procedures,
Right,
just to know what they're
right.
talking about. Be smart, be get on their level, and it really helps out because it kind of helps cut like some of that early easy questions out of the way, and then you like you said you could like laser in onto the topics that you really want to get into. So I think that's phenomenal advice. I like that a lot. Um,
True. The more you're prepared before you even reach out to them, the more impressed they'll be.
yeah,
And it will open up a better dialogue and relationship.
I think that's really fair because I know I had a lot of FOIA requesters that that I talked way more to FOIA requesters that were very savvy, right, about the FOIA because it was just more interesting things to like work through, right, and it was very engaging for me as someone who was like a subject matter expert on the topic, and as I'm sure you know, when you do end up talking to subject matter experts, a lot of times they're very happy to talk about their subject. So yeah, I think that's very fair to say as well. That's good. That's very good. Um, mhm.
Another recommendation is
Yes, sir.
appeal to their ego.
Yeah.
Call them the expert. Say, hey, and that will open a floodgate of information from them. That's been my experience. That's just in general with any field in reporting. Recognize them as the subject matter experts, and you're going to get a lot more information out of them.
Got it. Good to know. Got to butter them up a little bit. Got to butter them up a little bit. I like it.
Yes.
I like it. I like it. Well, I'll just tell you, that'll get you everywhere. Okay. All right. Changing the gears a little bit. Changing the gears just a tiny bit. All right. So, big question big subject that's been around for quite some time. Voter fraud allegations generate a lot of heat, right? But often there's not much documentary evidence that goes along with the allegations. What records actually exist that can help a reporter cut through the noise and ground their reporting in the actual facts surrounding an allegation of voter fraud?
Yeah, I mean, most of the allegations that I'm familiar with about voter fraud are mail-in ballots.
Yep.
And the empirical evidence is that uh, voter fraud is almost non-existent. It is certainly um, uh, more along the lines that somebody likely innocently sent in a mail-in ballot, and then maybe they changed their mind and they decided to go to the poll and voted in person.
Mhm.
That's what I've heard more on the evidence side.
Yep.
That doesn't mean that somebody was trying to vote twice. That means they simply changed their mind.
Right.
So to flesh that out, uh, that's where the canvassing board, the role that they play. Okay, what was the voter intent? If a voter files an affidavit clarifying I hey,
Hmm.
I know I sent in my absentee ballot, but I changed my mind and I intended to vote this way. Then, of course, they discard the absentee ballot and they
Right.
accept the in-person vote. But challenges over, you know, ballots that are mailed in, um, those play out at the canvassing board.
Yep.
And if there's signature issues, for example, um, and they are required to in Florida to reach out to the voter. This part is not public because the public is not allowed to know who the identity of the voter is, only how they voted. But they can come in and submit an affidavit saying that is my signature or that is not. And the
Mm-hmm.
actual instances where somebody has, non-existent people or dead people
Right.
have submitted absentee ballots, um, those play out at the canvassing board. So make sure you know when their meetings are because they're scheduled well in advance and they're on key dates and times uh, during early voting,
Mhm.
and then of course even on the day of voting, and then afterwards. So get those calendars locked down. Maybe even reach out to canvassing board members and find out a little bit more about their process, and look particularly at their rules and the statute governing how absentee ballots are challenged and the affidavit process. That's what I would recommend.
Got it. Now the canvassing board sounds like it's like the primary authority for these sorts of investigations. I kind of have a follow-up question related to that, but it's a little less like, policy like derivative and a little bit more like just your thoughts on the climate, right? So with the canvassing boards being like the authority on these matters of like, allegations of voter fraud, doing the investigation work, we're getting into the nitty-gritty and trying to figure it out, right? I've heard that there is this. Yeah, it's a saying that I heard once. It was there is a slip between living and the law, right? And when you're caught in that slip, a lot of things get very fuzzy and very murky. When it comes to the canvassing board, its authority and its findings and its investigations, um, have this sense that like sometimes people feel as if those findings are like somehow not enough. Do you think that that is a product from people just not knowing about how these things function? Or do you think it's a product of maybe perhaps, the process is a little bit too buried in like legalese or in policy or something? What's your take? Why does it seem to be sometimes not enough for some people?
Well, frankly, my
Mhm.
experience with actual incidents of that, of people dissatisfied with the outcome of the whatever the canvassing board has decided, has political blinders on. They want to
Mhm.
see a result that simply doesn't square with the evidence. And so I think that uh, that even if it's an implicit bias of the individual, they want their candidate to win. I mean,
Right.
we have
Yeah.
sort of uh, I don't know if elevated is the right word, maybe lowered. Um, uh, Politics and the importance of voting to almost like it's a sports, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
pulling for the Dallas Cowboys or the
Right.
Miami Dolphins.
Or the
And,
Knicks. Yep.
right, the
Yep. Yep.
Knicks.
Yep. Yeah.
And you want them to win. People even wager these days
Yeah, they
on
do. A lot of money too.
outcomes.
Yep.
So it's it's infected the process, in my view,
Hmm.
of voting, the importance of democracy and voting, political rhetoric, and so that's my answer.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that frank answer. I really appreciate it. Digging in a little bit more into like like the charged politics, for lack of a better word, right, that we're talking about here. Election records requests are increasingly landing in politically charged environments where officials on all sides feel very scrutinized, right? I wanted to ask you, in your experience, and as you've been talking to these people, I'm sure you've made professional and personal relationships with these folks. And I've gotten to know them and their families. What is the impact of this this higher level of scrutiny onto these professionals that are running our elections, at least in Florida?
It really is burdensome.
Hmm.
It makes uh, honest people uh, not want to do that kind of work, and because it's so politically charged, and that I call it the no good deed goes unpunished
Yeah.
theory. And so um, it does have an impact on um, the people that are involved in making those determinations, the professionals. It also has an impact on the credibility of the elections itself and the
Yeah.
process.
Hmm.
Because if I've seen situations where a candidate or people supporting a candidate uh, have relied on, well, our polling data does not square with the outcome of the election. Well, okay, polling data is not exactly scientifically reliable. And I think
Hmm.
that's been proven again
Yep.
and again by recent elections.
That's right. That's right.
So, so we can't we don't decide elections by polling data
Yep.
or who you want to win. We
Right.
decide them on actual, that's why we play the game of
Right.
football to see who is going to win,
Yep.
and the uh, politics, and we vote to see who's actually going to win.
Yes. Hmm. I think that's a very astute observation. I really, really like that. I think part of the reason why I like it so much is because, not to get like too philosophic with it here, but it's sort of like, the object of the vote, right? The object of voting in elections is like the actual vote, the ballots themselves, the things that are cast and put in, and the real thing, right? But then the concept of voting, right, has sort of been like has gone away from the actual vote itself and is becoming this game of like, catch down, who's leading, who's not leading. It feels a lot more like a race of horses than it feels like, an election day. right? And I feel like people are in the past and recently have sort of been internalizing like that race, right? And that like, the back and forth that's going on before the election actually happens as the election rather than the election itself. Is that fair to say?
Oh yes, gosh,
Mhm.
elections have become so emotionally charged, and I use that word deliberately
Yeah,
because it's true. Um, it's people don't approach elections from an objective standpoint. They approach them from some preconceived notions, many of which are rooted in their their beliefs, but um, it's also a very highly emotional, charged atmosphere.
yeah,
And I think there are candidates. I'm not going to say who, but
of
they're on both
course.
sides
Yeah.
that have injected that partisan raw emotion that are on the fringe of both sides, both political parties that are driving the centrist voters really over the edge.
hmm hmm Yeah, yeah, that's totally fair to say. I think it's super fair to say. Now going back out of here a little bit, right? Obviously, we're in the particular political moment that we are in right now, right, where things are different, things are feel more charged, overcharged, things like that. But you've been doing this work much longer than just the past few years, right? And this particular political moment. What, I guess for lack of a better question, like what has stayed the same and what has actually been different? Like have we seen aspects of this sort of stuff before, like in the 90s, right? Even before like, the 2000 election. Also, like is it that have things gotten better in other ways?
Uh, Gosh, that's such a great question. And I, from my experience,
Hmm
a lot has changed. That politically charged elections seem to drone on and on, um, much longer in time. It seems
Yeah.
as
It's
if
like a
an
season, right?
election,
Yeah.
right, an
Yeah.
election starts as soon as one ends,
Yep.
and voter fatigue is another issue.
Yep.
Um, so, uh, what is that a consequence of? Well, really, I trace it back to Citizens United and the
hmm
decision of the U.S. Supreme Court to allow corporations and political action committees to uh, influence elections through um, huge sums of money. I think that has changed the landscape and got us to where we are now.
hmm You're fair. That's super fair. But going back just a little bit, what do you it's been a long time since since the 90s, right? It's a long time since the 80s.
Yeah.
What has gotten better? How we leverage technology, has the state of Florida leveraged technology in a way that makes these things more transparent? Yeah, what's gotten good?
Uh, I do agree that technology has made things much better.
Hmm
Um, you could say that the rules, the tightening of the rules, the recently in the
Yeah,
last one or two election cycles of tightening down the days that voters have the opportunity to vote, like early voting. Some states have peeled back, uh, a number of days that you can uh, that early voting is allowed. I don't see that. Well, there are pros and cons to that. The pros are more people vote when there's
right,
early voting. The cons are it seems to drag out the what I just said about the timeline, the election
right.
process, and voter fatigue,
hmm
um, uh, to infinite number.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so so voting technology is definitely improved, um, and uh, voter education
hmm
through that uh, lengthy process has also improve. Now,
Yeah,
I don't know whether that makes people better voters because again, you get overwhelmed. The saturation level of information
right.
can can just overwhelm any voter.
Any person, yeah, any person. The amount of information out there is oppressive almost. So yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying there. I guess I also want to ask too, like when it comes to the glut of information related to like elections, do you think that the that access, like somehow, not the transparency itself, and not the transparency mechanisms, but like just the sheer amount of information has also led to the overcharging that we're talking about?
Yes, I do. I mean, just as example, I mean,
Yeah.
anyone during election season, your mailbox is literally
You
stuffed
made me
to
remember. You're right. Yeah, you're very right about it. I
stuffed
don't even
to
want
the
to go out there.
gills.
Yeah.
The poor letter carriers these days. I mean, my gosh.
I know they
Um,
have to carry like 250-pound bags, sacks.
right.
Yeah.
And then there's the trees,
Oh, the poor
and
trees.
the
Yeah, definitely.
emails and the
Yep.
text
Hmm.
messages. That's what I think as technology has improved, but it's also a double-edged sword because it can quickly overwhelm any voter and
Yep.
make them just pray for the day and just want to check out and like, oh
Yeah.
God, I want to go to, a Buddhist retreat in the middle of nowhere with no internet
Yeah. Yeah.
during
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
election cycle.
Yep. You're not wrong about that. Well, this is going to be my last question. Then I'm going to be going into a Q&A from the chat. To the chat, anyone who's in there, please start flooding in your questions now. I'm going to go through them in the order that I receive them. So just FYI. But last question that I have for you directly, Michael, and thank you so much for being here. I love your insights, and I really, really enjoy this frank conversation. I hate to see it go, but I hope we'll have you back some other time. But with that being
Sure.
said, what is a records win on the elections beat that you think didn't get enough attention? Just something, something that maybe yeah, you saw, you thought was fantastic, great news, but no one really covered it. What's out there?
Um, I think that uh, local elections don't get enough coverage.
I agree,
Um,
Michael. I'm 1,000%
yeah.
with you. Yeah.
The national and maybe statewide elections just suck the air out of the room for local elections. And I think local elections are much more important at the end of the day for the people in the communities that where they live than the national elections. It is much more immediate impact of what's going on. So I think that that is something that's not covered adequately.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. Being in Northern Virginia, I feel like local elections are almost like more dramatic than otherwise. I'm in a very far western part of West Northern Virginia in Loudoun County, so things are always going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it really is annoying because when it is come like primary season or like national election time or state election time, I feel like my attention just is so much on that, and then I kind of forget like, oh, who's on my school boards? Where are my kids going to? Who are my kids? What policies are my kids falling under? And I miss those things. So I think that's super fair to say for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna leave it here for the Q&A for folks in the chat. I'm actually not seeing any right now, so we might have to cut this just a little bit short. I'm gonna give it about 2 more minutes at 1:48. I'm gonna call it time if I don't see any more in the chat. Um, but yeah, any like parting words you want to give us while there might be something brewing up?
Well, Florida never disappoints in political theater or drama. Um,
Right.
uh, there seems to be a lot going on here, so it keeps me busy, which is great. Um, uh, but I I know that one issue is brewing, but it doesn't seem that Congress has any appetite. Uh, uh, President Trump is pushing for I don't know what it's called, Voter Reform Act or
The Save
whatever. It's
Act.
like,
I think it's the Save
yeah,
Act. Yeah.
every election cycle we get another one, and they should have run out of acronyms a long time ago, but they apparently um, and uh, he's uh, held up the very bipartisan housing bill,
Yeah.
and waiting on them to pass the SAVE Act, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
And I think that uh, it's a telltale sign that uh, president has a, a fear that unless that act, which I think is not
Yeah.
not a good piece of legislation, um, that the midterms are not going to be favorable for his party, which never has been for an incumbent
President. Yep.
president.
Yeah,
So
that's always the story, right? Um,
yeah,
yeah, thank you for your thoughts there. I have one question from Kate Bauman. Please correct me if I mispronounce your name, Kate. Any thoughts on candidate forums? Good thoughts, bad thoughts?
yes, yes, I think they're great. I think candidates these days tend to avoid them,
Mhm.
and
For those of us who
I
do
have
not know, sorry, apologies. I want to take
sure.
one step back. For those of us who do not know, what is a candidate forum? What does that mean?
Candidate forum is where a neutral party, like say the League of Women Voters or a media outlet, invites both candidates to appear and ask them the same questions
Mhm.
and hard questions. And so that's what it's not so much a debate, it's a here are what we've identified from voters in our community that we want to ask both of you in each other's presence and the public's presence. How do you feel about whatever development, roads, traffic, school board, etc., taxes, and so I think those are really vital and do a lot to inform the voter because the candidates don't know the questions in advance.
Yeah.
And that's why increasingly you're seeing candidates eschew voter candidate forums, and
Hmm.
they don't want to appear with their opponent. And I think that's a really bad idea and a growing trend that I hope ends.
I'm in agreement there. I think that when it comes to, just being there, representing your ideas against opposition, it makes it clearer for voters what are you thinking, what's going on in your head, and what are your actual values going into these very important elections. And yeah, I think that that's a really cool thing. I wasn't aware that candidate forums were around. I just thought that they were political debates. So it's really cool to hear that that's like its own like whole thing. Can you name some organizations that commonly host those forums in your area?
Well, like Tiger Bay organization in Sarasota and Manatee, they typically hold candidate forums.
Hmm.
I know a collaboration of nonprofit news organizations like public radio and nonprofit news outlets in Sarasota and Manatee County have recently held some candidate forums and invite the public either to attend in person or online. And I think those are just really good ways for voters to be educated about the candidates in a fair, neutral environment. So I'm I think the League of Women Voters also does it in various jurisdictions across Florida, and I'm sure there are others that do it as well.
Hmm.
But those are the the stalwarts from my recollection.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for all your expertise, your time, and all your patience with my fun questions. I think that's going to be it for just right for today. And yeah, Michael, thank you so much. This is a very good conversation. I learned a lot of stuff about Florida elections, is including candidate forums. So yeah,
Yes,
thank you, and
yes,
yeah,
this has been great.
yeah, thanks.
Really.
We're probably going to be covering this more down the line, so we'll keep your number.
All right. Thanks.
Right.
Have a great day, Nicholas.
You too, Michael. Thank you so much. Have a great one, everybody. See you on the next FOIA
All right.
Friday.
Bye bye.
Bye.